Welcome, sports fans, to the Super Bowl edition of Gay USA.
Can I talk about how I'm a winner at the Super Bowl?
You're a winner no matter what happens. I have the Chiefs and I get 2 points.
And what's your bet?
Oh, $10. My brother and I do it. I've been winning lately, though. I just let him pick and I take the other team, but with the spread.
Yeah. Well, 2 points is good because I think the line is 1.5 for the Eagles. You know, the Eagles predicted to win and giving away 1.5.
So. Yeah, it's bounced around. And it changes it changes constantly.
Yeah.
Depending on where the money's going.
Yeah.
I could care less about it. It is the day that I do my tax receipts and keep the game on in the background. That is my tradition.
Okay.
And I use the Ann Northrop system of tax receipts, throw them in a bag all year.
Yes. It's the only way.
Thank you for that. Well, the other way is to have folders and separate them as you file.
And then you have to go back into all those folders.
Well, but then the sorting has happened.
All right. Well, we weren't sure we'd have much news this week, but it turns out we do.
We do.
So we are going to start the Gay USA television program in 1 second.
And we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrop.
How about that, Joe Biden?
I was astonished. What a guy.
He did urge the passage of the Equality Act and support explicitly for trans youth. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders, governor of Arkansas, in her Republican response promoted cruelty and bigotry. It was bracing.
Both sides were astonishing. It's very hard for me to come to grips with the reality of Sarah Huckabee Sanders as governor of anything, but there she is. Meanwhile, George Santos was not invisible. His criminality and grotesqueness just gets worse. And what we saw last night was Mitt Romney calling him out to his face.
In Oklahoma, activists occupied the state capitol to protest anti-trans bills.
And the right wing found an angle on that, too. There is a campaign now to remount the canceled lesbian-themed high school production in Florida.
A pope, an English archbishop, and a Scottish church leader get on a plane from Africa and talk gay.
It certainly does sound like a joke. Our out gay ambassador to Hungary is drawing fire for being who he is.
And Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., you might have seen her at the State of the Union earlier in the week, was speaking out for gay rights, LGBTQ rights.
A study has found that anal cancer in HIV-positive gay men is diminishing, but we're still urged to exercise screening to prevent it.
The Grammys made LGBTQ history.
All over the place. And Andy will review Nora Burns' production, The Village, a disco musical.
At Dixon Place. So the president, quite a feisty speech. I had people calling me who, I can't stand Biden. Why doesn't he stop running? They were thrilled with it.
Well, it's a big surprise. It's usually the biggest snore of the year. You have to be a real geek to want to watch it. As news people, we feel we have to watch it. The previous highlight was Nancy Pelosi tearing up Trump's speech at the end of one of his performances. But last night was a killer. It was fun. It was exciting.
Well, I was always fond of watching prime ministers' questions from Britain, where the prime minister gets up and the opposition is right across there asking questions and challenging and hooting and hollering. And, that's kind of what it was like. And Biden was totally prepared for that and performed very well.
Yeah. And as some have said, I think this poked a hole in the story that he's too old, because he really was very quick on his feet and very well spoken and very on top of things. I like the clear political decision of topics to emphasize. There are a lot of things he didn't talk about that we might complain about, but what he did talk about, I think, was well chosen and well said.
And if you were wondering how old he is, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, "I'm 40 and he's 80." I mean, it was just too much. I don't know.
Well, she clearly needs a little more seasoning. Maybe 40 years from now, she'll be as smart about these things as he is, because she certainly isn't now.
But look, we always wait to see, how a president is going to address our issues in the course of the speech. And we did get a shout out. Let's run it.
If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example. Let's remember the world's watching.
And I was watching, of course, when the camera cut to Kyrsten Sinema, the independent now senator from Arizona, who gets up and applauds the Equality Act when she's the person who blocked removal of the filibuster from the Senate, which would have allowed the passage of the Equality Act, which the House passed last year under Nancy Pelosi.
Well, it was sort of a shocker to suddenly see that apparition in yellow. That was unexpected.
Well, she's a big hypocrite. That's all.
Well, those C-SPAN directors and camera people who were covering all the Kevin McCarthy's speaker votes so brilliantly and beautifully are clearly sitting in the chairs last night catching those sights. I am not a fan of Kyrsten Sinema, never have been. But I think it is possible to both support something and not support a particular method together.
We were kind of hopeful when she came in. We reported her. All we knew about her was that she was an out bisexual and a Democrat.
Well, some of us had been following her a little more closely and knew a little more.
When she was first elected to the Senate, we were down on her. No, I don't think we were.
I specifically went to an LPAC fundraiser and objected to the fact that they were funding her.
You are ahead of your time.
I hope so. But she's always been a little problematic. But just when you've given up on her, she comes up with something that saves her. So it's
anyway. The president also spoke up against school bullying. He spoke out for the Respect for Marriage Act. He also spoke up for the PEPFAR program that funds international HIV/AIDS programs, which is now 20 years old. And
in the category of things he could have talked about, he could have talked about all the violent attacks on these drag story hours, the Proud Boys showing up with rifles, the right-wing assaults on the whole community, starting with Ron DeSantis in Florida and the way that is spreading like wildfire. He could have spent a lot of time on all of that, but he has to pick and choose. I felt that his references to us were a little bit of a throwaway, but certainly better than nothing.
And Ms. Sanders from Arkansas attacked Biden for siding with people who can't even say what a woman is.
And talked about making children hate each other on the basis of race and bragging about outlawing critical race theory education in her state of Arkansas. It was just a hateful response that she gave that was so angry and so illegitimate and so.
And they loved it at Fox News.
Well, they may have, but I can't imagine the audience for that is doing anything but shrinking. It was shocking.
We can only hope. Otherwise, we're in real trouble. And Mitt Romney got angry when he ran into George Santos sitting right on the aisle so he could shake the president's hand, telling him he didn't belong in Congress, that he's an embarrassment and an ass. Strong words from a Mormon.
He got blocked from shaking the president's hand. Some Republican woman representative stepped in front of him just as the president was coming by, and Santos was not able to shake the president's hand.
And Romney told NBC that Santos is a sick puppy. Santos then tweeted to Romney, "You're never going to be president." It's grade school.
Well, that was shocking that he would be so aggressive in his response to Romney. But Santos was making news for another reason last week, and that had to do with his jewelry.
All right. There he is. He's wearing that AR-15 pin. Couldn't be more disgusting. Let's go over what the AR-15 has been used for. To slaughter 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, 58 in Las Vegas in 2017, 27 little kids and their teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012, et cetera, et cetera. Despicable.
Completely. But there was some, I wish I could remember who, there was another representative who had a supply of these pins and was offering them to his colleagues. And Santos was one who took the pin and put it on his lapel.
Well, I mean,
what is the point of that?
And the president spoke out strongly for an assault weapons ban, which we used to have in this country. And of course, it's absolutely nuts that we're the only country that, civilized country that doesn't. By
the way, Pete Buttigieg is sort of mildly in the presidential race conversation because, in fact, he did better in a New Hampshire poll than Biden did a couple of weeks ago. But he has said very explicitly that he's not considering that. And he has also said that he is ruling out running for the open Senate seat in Michigan in 2024, where he now has property and is voting from.
Finishing up on Santos, we don't know how credible this is, but someone who interviewed for a job there accused him of sexual harassment, which Santos categorically denies. He used that language, which is the same thing he said when he was told. People reported that he was a drag queen, which of course he was. They had film on that. He also made illegal use of campaign funds to pay personal rent. You're not allowed to do that. And he diverted tens of thousands to a gay right-wing group called the Liberty Education Forum, which claims to work to help LGBTQ people in the Middle East. But thousands also went for Santos and friends to attend their $600 a head gala that was headlined by Melania Trump and RNC chair Ronna McDaniel. And there's more reporting on the fraud at his unregistered animal rescue charity. So,
shall we move to the states and the good and bad things?
Well, I want to do a couple. I think we should talk about that decision from the the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. A three-judge panel are now weighing a Texas federal judge's order barring the EEOC from pursuing LGBTQ bias claims against employers who have religious exemptions. This is called Braidwood Management Services, which has 70 employees and says, we would not employ gay or transgender employees. It's not a religious organization. No one has sued them. So do they have standing? Well, one of the judges, Republican, said, you know, you're reading the Bostock decision out of existence. Anybody can say I'm opposed to this and they can opt out of what the Supreme Court said. But the other two judges were like, well, you know, it's pre-enforcement, but it's ripe for review. And you know, they're always looking out for religion and never looking out for us. And the other Fifth Circuit decision, which does affect LGBTQ people, they issued the most radical Second Amendment decision in U.S. history, saying our ancestors would never have accepted disarming domestic abusers because domestic abuse was not a crime.
Well, let's take a step back on that. The law that was passed that was being challenged was barring people who had been convicted of domestic abuse from owning guns. So the right wing went into court, and because they defend all gun ownership and use, and said, no, that's not legitimate. And the court said, well, you're right, because in the 18th century, it was not illegal to beat your wife or shoot her, I guess. So, or at least own a gun, no matter what you'd done to her. So clearly the Constitution does not prohibit people from owning guns just because they're domestic abusers. And so therefore we're getting rid of this law.
Believe it or not, court watchers think this is something that the Supreme Court will not uphold because of what Roberts and Kavanaugh, I think it is, have said about this before. Yeah. Yep.
Well, all this stuff is going to end up in the Supreme Court, including the Colorado trans cake, and we'll see where they come down. But we are certainly on a potential path to a theocracy, wiping out
Well, why don't we get a new form of government? What are we waiting for? All right. They're not waiting in Oklahoma. On Monday, LGBTQ activists and allies gathered at the state Capitol building. There they are, to protest bills that would ban gender-affirming care for those under 26 and further restrict it for minors. Out trans legislator in Oklahoma, State Representative Mauree Taylor, said, I live and work in a body where I could come to work on a Monday morning and get a death threat just for showing up as Black, trans, Muslim, and gender diverse in Oklahoma. It was a peaceful protest. But anti-trans activists such as Chaya Raichik, who's obsessed with us over there on the libs of TikTok, called them insurrectionists and domestic terrorists. There was no clash with the police, no violence, and they weren't armed with anything more than a plea for justice.
Yeah, I mean, the right wing said, hey, you prosecute the January 6th people who attacked the Capitol. How is this any different? Look at that mob. And the answer is they weren't breaking windows. They weren't bashing cops. They weren't breaking into offices. They were just holding a demonstration on public property.
In Virginia, go ahead.
Good news from Virginia. The Virginia House Committee killed 6 anti-trans youth bills. They were around medical care for trans youth and school sports accessibility. So
the House of Delegates has a narrow Republican majority.
Well, they killed these bills.
But in the Senate there, which has a narrow Democratic majority, they approved a resolution to repeal the amendment to the state constitution prohibiting same-sex marriage. It passed 25-14 in a bipartisan vote. Last month, they passed a separate bill also to make same-sex marriage legal. Now, this needs approval in both chambers in 2 sessions. And last year, the House of Delegates under Republican control voted to reject it.
In South Dakota, the House there passed a bill to forbid gender-affirming care for trans youth. They've gone back on and forth on these bills, but that is advancing in South Dakota. This is,
there are 276 bills now. The number keeps growing, and go to the ACLU.org as one of the sources to find out what's going on in your state and try doing something about it. Because, as Ann just talked about in Virginia, they were able to beat some of these things back in a Republican-controlled House of the legislature.
Well, please get to work in Wyoming, where the Senate has passed a bill that makes trans medical care for youth a felony. That is making its way through the Wyoming legislature. Good news in New York State, the state legislature passed the ERA. Yes. And that
includes explicitly sexual orientation and gender identity now.
It does. And it's been through the legislature the requisite number of times. It will be on the ballot in 2024 for the voters to.
I remember when it was on the ballot in the 70s, and New York voters voted down the Equal Rights Amendment. And in that case, it just covered the category of sex.
In Montana, the House is moving along a bill to allow all medical practitioners to refuse care for anything on the basis of conscience. They can refuse to serve LGBTQ patients. They can refuse to have anything to do with trans medical care. They can refuse anybody for anything.
Can progressive people not serve conservatives because we object to them or something? Is that
Well,
the case?
it would be interesting to try to throw that in their face, but it may be, as my mother would have said, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
That's getting bad. In Orange County, California, right-wingers took over the school board there. They ousted the progressive superintendent, and they put in their stooge, who promptly eliminated the district ebook app, lest students actually learn anything. Now they're forming a committee to review content before opening it up again, but they didn't consult the teachers. One book was complained about, A Polar Bear in Love, about a male polar bear who asks to marry a male baby seal when he's older. Now, it sounds a little kinky, but nothing really salacious. And it turns out the book wasn't even on the app. And the actual plot of the book is a polar bear falls in love with a seal, and the seal thinks the polar bear is trying to eat it.
It all does look a little questionable. Cross species love, age.
And so therefore all ebooks are banned in Orange County.
I don't know. That's a little frightening. But really frightening is what happened to a trans doctor in Shreveport, Louisiana, Dr. Tiffany Najberg, a trans woman who, after she transitioned in the middle of her medical career, some medical insurers like Medicare and Medicaid just continued to reimburse her patients for their costs. But Aetna, Cigna, and Humana insurance companies refused suddenly to reimburse bills from her office because she had transitioned.
Putting her heavily into debt.
Yep.
So she got a petition up, and she got 12,000 signatures and got media attention. And they've agreed to back pay the claims, although she hasn't gotten anything yet. So she's been in trouble.
She had used all her life savings, had to set up a GoFundMe account, and had to drop her own insurance coverages because she couldn't afford them. She had changed her name when she transitioned, and they wouldn't recognize it. Now they've reached this settlement with her, but man, they put her through the ringer. What was the point of that?
Well, we've told you, the students in Jacksonville, Florida high school there, they had mounted a production of Paula Vogel, out lesbian playwright's play Indecent, which had been on Broadway. It has a lesbian theme. And at the Performing Arts High School there. Now Paula and others are working on remounting the play. Now, they've been threatened if they do it in the high school, so they might have to take it off campus, but they're looking at bringing it up. The Dramatists Guild is siding with them, and they're upset about the fact that the musical by William Finn, out gay writer, the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, one of the most produced musicals in high schools ever. Well, they went after this. Now in Middlefield, Ohio. Now in Florida, the principal cited Vogel's play Indecent's mature content and wants them to do The Seagull by Chekhov, which was more appropriate. A play that deals with sexual desire and infidelity and concludes with a suicide.
Maybe he thinks it's about a bird.
And a lot of this is based on one parent objecting, or that it's vulgar. Oh, with Spelling Bee, one parent said it's vulgar. It has a reference to Jesus that I don't like, and a character that has two dads. So ban it.
It's only escalating, folks. And that's why I do wish that Biden had said something about all this in the State of the Union. But I will settle for a big speech from him in the near future about all of this, where he has some kind of big
We have
audience.
to wait for Pride Day.
Oh, God, I hope not. In Salt Lake City, Utah, an armed contingent of Proud Boys threatened a monthly drag story hour that has been going on for years. They show up, they brandish their weapons, they're all in camo. This is what parents want for their kids, for this crowd to show up and threaten them like this?
Right.
The FBI is helping investigate attacks now on bars and libraries and schools that hold drag story hours. Too little, too late, I hope.
Yeah, and these groups go after council members in New York who have funded Drag Time Story Hour.
Well, that's just Missouri, where the FBI is investigating, by the way.
So we got pictures of these three city council members. That's Crystal Hudson of Brooklyn and Shakar Krishnan of Queens, and our own Eric Botcher, who lives right behind us here at London Terrace. And they say our response is we're going to increase funding for the program. Krishnan has been subject to 11 protests, 2 at his home. He said far-right extremism must be taken more seriously. It begins by reframing and rethinking how we think about these things. This is not protest. This is harassment and intimidation.
It is. It's a physical attack. I've been out there watching this happen, and it's scary. It is really scary.
Well, I did have a viewer come up to me on the street and say, now, you were complaining about the vandalism of these people chalking the sidewalk in front of Eric's house. And he said, that's not vandalism. We did that and act up all the time.
Well, we didn't call people groomers and pedophiles and with chalking in front of their house. We did put a condom on Jesse Helms.
Maybe murderers.
That's an entirely different thing. The condom on Jesse Helms' house may have been a little cheeky, but I refuse the comparison.
Okay.
Meanwhile, in Kansas City, a Christian K-8 school, the Envision School, has now lost funding and had to close because they have talked openly about their support for LGBTQ kids. A Christian school, they've been doing it for years. They've been a very progressive school this way, and they finally started talking about it more openly, and boom, the funding disappeared and the school has had to close.
More on religion later.
Very Christian.
In New York City, we've told you about a series of robberies and druggings, including killings of patrons of gay bars and some non-gay venues in New York. Now, this is not exactly part of that. Two guys outside the Eagle Bar right in our neighborhood here. We have a wanted poster of the alleged perpetrator. They lure inebriated customers leaving the bar into a car, hold their phones up to their faces to open up the phones through facial recognition, and then use the phones to make unauthorized purchases. They robbed these guys of $1,000 to $5,000 in October and November, and a man and a woman also at a hotel in New York, the Hotel Chantel. So this is not related to the druggings and killings, but it's the same kind of MO. Watching people come out of bars, importuning them, maybe drugging them, and robbing them, and not caring if they die.
So the newest thing to add to your list of protective moves is disable facial recognition on your phone before you go to a situation like this.
Where you're going to drink, okay.
Yeah. I actually want to throw in a couple of pieces of good news. We've been watching Pennsylvania and special elections that were held there yesterday. We're taping on Wednesday. This was a Tuesday special election for House seats in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania's legislature, it's two sections of the legislature have been Republican controlled for a long time. They've had a Democratic governor and they have a new Democratic governor, but the legislature has been very Republican. Well, the Democrats won all 3 House seats that were up for the special election and have now taken a very slim margin of control in the House.
That's
and
great.
one of the newly elected 3 is Abigail Salisbury, Jewish, bisexual, with autism, and a lawyer. And that makes her the second female bisexual with autism in the state house.
All right. Take it over. What about the other chamber?
The Senate in Pennsylvania is still controlled by the Republicans, but with a Democratic governor and a Democratic House now, they think that they can get some things accomplished that they couldn't before. I've forgotten the details, but it's definitely progress. Also, we want to congratulate if we can say anything positive about TikTok these days, the chief operating officer is V. Pappas, formerly known as Vanessa, who has come out as non-binary and pansexual, lives with her female partner and 2 kids, and will use the pronouns they, them, and she, her. Chief operating officer of TikTok.
Last year, TikTok said it will ban misgendering, dead-naming, misogyny, and conversion therapy content.
And what do the Chinese owners have to say about all that?
Yeah.
Now,
all right.
You wanted to, we lost another trans woman, Zaki Imami Twitaho, an immigrant from Rwanda. She came here 4 years ago. 26 years old, shot dead near her job by a 58-year-old co-worker.
They both worked at this J.B. Swift meatpacking place. The suspect was another employee who turned himself in. She immigrated to the U.S. in 2019 and now is gone.
What a gorgeous outfit that was.
Now, we told you about the passing of Charles Silverstein, famous, eminent psychologist, who one of the leaders of the fight to get us out of the index of mental disorders at the American Psychiatric Association in 1973. We have a picture of that crew when they were celebrating. So there's Ron Gold, left to right, Ron Gold, Charles Silverstein, Frank Kameny, and Barbara Giddings. What a crew. That's a Mount Rushmore for our community. And I wrote him up for the Gay City News, and I'll send the link out for that. But I read more about his campaign to do this. He was only a graduate student at the time. He was just starting out. He wasn't even a licensed psychologist until the next year. And he was a member of the Gay Activists Alliance. And they zapped the psychiatrist. And he was the one to give the speech to the nomenclature committee, which was going to decide this. And what he said to them was to continue to classify homosexuality as a disorder is as valid today as was the diagnosis of masturbation in the 1942 edition. We have paid the price for your past mistake. Don't make it again. And the other thing he said was, if Dr. Robert Spitzer, a very famous researcher who was on the committee, had not been in the room when they did the zap and was sympathetic, he helped guide it all through because it was a divided vote among the psychiatrists. And people like Charles Socarides went ape when this happened and demanded a whole vote of the membership, and they squeaked it through. He said if Spitzer hadn't been there, this might have taken years.
And they went through all sorts of maneuvers about how they did the zap so that they could get some sympathy. It ended up being a sort of 60-40 vote to change the diagnosis. Socarides, I think, was quite shocked that he lost the vote. But it's a great story. And you're right. Great, great, great heroes.
All of them.
Yes. And all gone. All gone.
Yes, indeed. Well, this was 1973. Charles died at 87.
Yeah. All right. International news.
So again, a Catholic, an Anglican, and a Presbyterian tour Africa and then get on a plane. We're talking about the Pope Francis, Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby, and the moderator of the Church of Scotland, Ian Greenshields, on their way home from South Sudan.
That's Welby in the red on the right, Green Shields in the white with the necklace, and the Pope, of course, sitting down there.
Very easy to pick out in a crowd.
Yeah.
They reiterated on the plane their denouncement of the criminalization of homosexuality and said gay people should be welcomed by their churches. Gay people might feel more welcome if these religions did their weddings, which the Church of Scotland does, by the way.
Yes.
Francis said to condemn someone like this is a sin, an injustice. And Welby said that the Lambeth Conference, which they're going to have, has twice come out against criminalization, but said it's really not changed anybody's minds. You know, an Anglican bishop in South Sudan, Abraham Duat, isn't budging. It is better for you to get 2 wives than to become a gay, he said.
Well, I'm glad we know the formula. Welby was quite enthusiastic about the Pope's energy around decriminalization, but he's in the Lambeth Conference this week, sticking right to his quote neutral unquote position. And Peter Tatchell is out there this morning demonstrating against the hypocrisy of Welby and the Anglican Church for its supposed sympathy but refusal to challenge the gay haters around the world.
Well, look, I mean, I make no excuses, but I mean, if it was just the Church of England, I don't think it would be a problem. But he's seen as the leader of the Anglican Communion, and that's where the rub comes in.
Well, I still think they could be a little more active, and they could,
especially when you're supposed to be dedicated to the truth.
Yeah, I mean, be like the Catholics, have some standards.
All right. Professional surfer Bethany Hamilton says she will boycott World Surf League events if trans women are allowed to compete. The WSL is adopting the standards of the International Surfing Association, maintaining a certain testosterone level for 12 months. And they say that they're just following the Olympic guidelines. But this very famous surfer is objecting.
Yeah, I can't say that I care. In Suriname, the Constitutional Court will not recognize a male couple who were married in Argentina. The Suriname court wrongly said that they are not required to legalize or recognize a same-sex marriage. But in fact, they are ignoring the order of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that all Central and South American countries must legalize same-sex marriage. They're just defying that. So I suspect it's not the last we'll hear of that. But meanwhile, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the governor there signed a non-discrimination order that covers sexual orientation and gender identity. That was nice.
In Japan, there was an aide to the Prime Minister Kishida who was fired for saying he wouldn't want to live next door to LGBTQ people and that citizens would flee Japan if same-sex marriage were allowed. So LGBTQ activists held a press conference this week demanding that the government enact non-discrimination and legalization of same-sex marriage ahead of Japan hosting the G7 summit in May.
Yeah, I don't picture that happening very fast. The prime minister in the past has said that legalization of same-sex marriage must be considered carefully. Some read that as a progressive attitude. Some regard that as conservative and slowing it down. But at least he didn't come out against it completely. In Hong Kong, a court ruled that trans people can change their official identity cards and papers without surgery. They can declare themselves and get a new gender identity official designation.
Let's go to the fascist country of Hungary, member of the European Union. Our U.S. ambassador there is out gay human rights lawyer David Pressman. There he is, serving there with his husband.
And 2 kids.
What? Yep. While he was being confirmed, opponents floated a dinghy on the Danube outside the embassy. It reads in English, Mr. Pressman, don't colonize Hungary with your cult of death. He kept a photo of it. He keeps a photo of it on the wall behind his embassy desk. Now, the pro-government TV there denounced him as a diplomatic provocation, and a guest on the show called him Madam Ambassador, so third grade. Pressman says Hungarian state media ape Russian tropes, and he confronted the government on its reliance on Putin. But all they want to talk about is culture wars there. Nevertheless, he says he thinks Hungary sees its future in Europe, the US and the West, not Russia and China. I mean, that's the thing. Hungary wants to stay in the European Union, wants the benefits, but then, is culturally sympathetic to the Russians.
Well, this is a strain that's common in Eastern Europe, but we knew sending a gay ambassador into the belly of the beast in Hungary with Viktor Orban was not going to be an easy lift. I think this guy's doing great and standing up openly and proudly and confronting it. I'm proud of the United States for sending him there, but he is suffering the predicted slings and arrows, and it's not
easy. Standing up for what were traditionally American values, but of course the Republican Party has aligned itself with Orban.
Yes, the Republican Party. Tucker Carlson did a show from over there. They held the CPAC conference there. It's terrible. But contrarily, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, spoke last week in very pro-LGBTQ and intersex people support and the rights they deserve, and did it in the name of all the LGBTQ and intersex people who have served in the military for Ukraine in their war with Russia.
The faster we can stop any discrimination, the faster we will win, not only on the battlefield in Ukraine, but we also will win globally. The event was organized by QUA, LGBTQ Ukrainians in America, the Ukrainian Union of LGBTQ Military, and Kyiv Pride. She's the first Ukrainian ambassador to speak at an LGBTQ specific event in the United States. And of course, she was an honored guest at the State of the Union.
In a little more murky territory, in Malta, an ex-gay man is self-described, is going around promoting conversion therapy, and he is now being prosecuted for that promotion of conversion therapy, because conversion therapy is illegal in Malta. Do we want to prosecute people for free speech? I don't know.
So we told you, are we on to AIDS news?
Yes.
We told you how the Tennessee governor has rejected $8 million in federal funds for HIV prevention from the CDC because a little bit of it goes to Planned Parenthood and some of that goes to trans programs. All right, so that was the deal. Reject all the funding. He says, we'll make up the funding somehow. But Tennessee's lone Democratic Congress member is recommending that the service organizations that are essentially being defunded go directly to the CDC, go to HHS, and get the funds that way. I hope they will express these payments and make it happen, because otherwise you're going to have a surge in HIV infections and deaths in Tennessee.
Sure. And can the federal government hand out those grants directly without going through the State Department of Health?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
They ought to be able to.
Well, you would think so, but maybe someone will tell us.
Okay.
Now, what's the story about anal cancers?
So there's a study in the Netherlands that found in recent years that gay men with HIV are less likely to get anal cancer than before. In the general population, 1 to 2 people per 100,000 get anal cancer. Among HIV-positive gay men, it's been 85 out of 100,000. But since 2013, there's been a 40% drop in that rate. Why? Well, starting antiretroviral treatment promptly helps, and also quitting smoking, because that has a relationship, and smoking has gone down. However, and cofactor is nicotine. HIV-positive women and straight men, however, do not show the same decrease, maybe because they don't get tested for HIV regularly, and they get their diagnosis later. So they're recommending routine screening for anal cancer to catch it early through a pap smear or a biopsy. Every year, if you're HIV positive, 2 to 3 years for those HIV negative and over 50.
But we're talking about HPV here as the cause of these cancers. What does it have to do with HIV?
It's well, because there has been an observed higher rate among HIV positive people. That's why we're talking about it. Much higher rate. As I said, in the general population, 1 to 2 per 100,000 HIV positive gay men, 85 out of 100,000. So that's a concern.
Okay. All right.
80 million people in the United States have HPV, so it's very common. If you're young, get the vaccination for it.
Sure, and do get tested. I can't remember who it was in the last week or two who died of anal cancer, HPV, or was it HPV in the throat? Anyway, it's very common, and you should get tested.
Okay.
All right, entertainment news. Well, of course, the Grammys were the big event this last Sunday night, and they had quite a fair amount of gay content. But the most heartwarming moment was when Beyonce won an award. She won a lot of awards, but this one was for Best Dance or Electronic Album. And this was the one that put her over the top as having won the most Grammys ever, 32, I think.
Yep.
And she got up and thanked first her uncle Johnny, who, although she didn't say it, was a gay man who died of AIDS. And she was very, very close to him. She's talked about him before. And he was the first one she mentioned in her speech.
Well, he introduced her to house music that inspired this album, Renaissance. And she said, I'd like to thank the queer community for your love and inventing the genre. We appreciate credit where credit is due.
Well, it was surprising and nice to hear her say that. It was a moving moment.
And then the non-binary Sam Smith and trans Kim Petras won the Best Pop Duo for Unholy. We have a shot of that. And they performed a scorching version of that mega hit, which drew the ire, of course, of Ted Cruz, who called it evil. Smith wore a hat with devil horns. Cruz said it encouraged devil worship, but where would Ted Cruz be in politics if people didn't worship devils? I digress. Petra said, Sam graciously wanted me to accept this award because I'm the first transgender woman to win it. She thanked the transgender legends who kicked down the doors so I could be here tonight. And she thanked Madonna, who introduced them for fighting for LGBTQ rights. And she also talked about not being wanted in religion for being trans. So you want us to, respect your religion, but they reject us.
She also talked about the great late trans singer Sophie, who we talked about a couple of years ago when she died in Greece at a very young age. And she talked about her supportive mom, who she said really her life would have been miserable if her mother had not supported her in her gender identity and her work.
Tell us about the first trans person to win Grammys.
Well, there may have been several, but the one that the internet talked about immediately after this speech was Wendy Carlos. Wendy Carlos is a trans woman who did the soundtrack for Clockwork Orange. An electronic music pioneer. She won 3 Grammys for her Switched on Bach album in 1970 in the classical category, although it was a sort of, electronic version of Bach. She came out as trans after she won those Grammys. So that's why Kim Petras's reference to herself as the first trans winner was technically correct because Wendy was not out at the time, but she was a very famous and very successful composer and 3 Grammys to her
I
credit.
know I'm not a music man, but I had that Clockwork Orange album and used to play it all the time in college. Sadly, by the way, the transphobic Dave Chappelle won Best Comedy Album for his Netflix special, The Closer. Beating out Randy Rainbow.
Yes, that was sad. But Ned Rorem was mentioned in the necrology, his passing. He was one of those in the in memoriam segment. And the now ubiquitous Brandi Carlile, who you can't turn on a TV or have a music event without Brandi Carlile, more on that in a moment, performed her hit Broken Horses, as for which she won Best Rock Song and Best Rock Performance. She, you know, when I saw her at Madison Square Garden, she was really doing a lot that she described as rock, and that is more rock oriented than the more country or pop stuff she was.
And I missed this part. Brandi was introduced by her wife, Katherine Shepard, and their 2 children.
Yes, they were on one of those little platforms in the middle of the audience, sort of with their back to the stage, and they're looking at the camera. And, you know, we're so thrilled to introduce our wife and mom, Brandi Carlile, and then the camera shoots past them to Brandi on stage.
And that's great, because we are under assault, and the more that this gets out there in the pop culture, the better.
And she's very popular, and this was very early on in the show, so it had a real spotlight. Also, out bisexual Steve Lacy performed. So between them and Sam Smith and Kim Petras, there was a lot of LGBTQ content in the show.
Okay, all right. Our pal and former colleague Nora Burns at the Gay Cable Network, we used to work together, has brought her visit to 1979, The Village, a disco musical, to Dixon Place through February 24th. It's a very trippy trip down memory lane for us older folks, and kind of a hilarious romp for everybody. It's got sex, drugs, and disco, not rock and roll.
Yeah.
So
and there's Nora, second from the right, sort of hiding a little in the back, the blonde.
And over there on the left is one of our viewers, Chuck Blasius, who plays Old George in this thing. He's pretty funny. So go to Dixon Place. It's a great cast. Go to dixonplace.org for more information.
And I'm going to something tomorrow night at the Center that's quite the event that you can't get into because it's sold out, but is going to be available on video. Joan Byron, Jeb, J-E-B, is a legendary photographer, particularly in the community, and particularly of lesbians. And in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, she was all over the place doing this. So she, at the Center here in New York tomorrow night, is recreating her Dyke Show, which is photographs from that period, and photographs of lesbians over many, many years. And they're opening a show at the Leslie Lohman Gallery here on March 10th, Images on Which to Build. And it's going to include a video of this event tomorrow night. So starting March 10th at the Leslie Lohman Gallery, you can see Jeb's Dyke Show, which should be raucous. It's going to be a full house tomorrow night of lesbians happy to see pictures of themselves.
Well, speaking of gay photographers, you've got Richard Avedon at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His big blow-up photographs, including the Andy Warhol factory people.
Have you seen the show?
No, not yet. I'm going to go this weekend.
I've been looking at pictures of it in various reviews and trying to figure out whether it includes the picture of the naked ACT UP demonstrators in the middle of 8th Avenue outside. I think it was the Republican convention one year.
I don't know. Another George Santos note. He told potential donors in 2021 that he had been a producer of Broadway's Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. An odd choice since it lost $60 million. But Santos, of course, had nothing to do with it.
Well, speaking of Broadway, Justin David Sullivan has made themselves ineligible for the Tonys because they are non-binary, and they object to the fact that the Tony Award categories are gendered as male or female. They play a non-binary character in Anne Juliet, and they've gotten great reviews. The Tonys say they are working thoughtfully to discuss change.
Okay.
I don't know. My objection to, I don't know how best to do these categories because they were set up to make sure that women got awards and not just men. But when you put everybody in one category together, first you risk imbalances. But do you then give out half the awards if you have one category instead of two? Do you need 3? Do you need 10? What do you do? I don't know.
They're just trade shows.
They are. And I guess not a trade show, but in California, Portia de Rossi surprised, I assume it was actually a surprise, Ellen, her wife of, I don't know what now, they've been married a dozen years, with a surprise vow renewal. That is Kris Jenner performing the ceremony. Brandi Carlile was there singing. And the guests included, you ready for this? Harry and Meghan were at the Ellen and Portia vow renewal. Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Aniston, Carol Burnett, Courtney Cox, Katy Perry. And that's only a partial list.
Now, William and Kate are going to have to go to a same-sex wedding. All right. I saw 2 exhibits at the Guggenheim Museum that I want to recommend in New York. The first is from Nick Cave. I didn't know he's an installation artist it's called For Other More, which is a new word that reflects his lifelong commitment to creating space for those who feel marginalized, especially working class communities and LGBTQ people of color. He's interrogating the promises, fulfilled or broken, that the late 20th and early 21st centuries offered to the other. Now that's through April 10th.
Well, I was curious when I saw this because it looks quite intriguing. He's a Black gay artist, and all of that sort of shines through this work. Did you like the work?
Yes, it's and it's on 3 floors, so it's different kinds of things. But the main Guggenheim is that spiral thing, and that's all Alex Katz. It's called Gathering. He's still alive. But this is only until February 20th. It's both really terrific and replete with gay subjects, including poet John Ashbery, born in 1927, like Katz, and his partner and later husband, David Kermani. Another one of Scott and John, the realist painter John Bolton, and critic Scott Burton. 1966, and then a 2017 portrait of choreographer Bill T. Jones. But it's a wonderful show, and I think you will enjoy it.
Well, anything else?
No, I'm done. Well, can we go home now? We got 2 minutes.
Almost. I just want to say again how I was out last night. I came home having recorded the State of the Union, and not looking forward to watching it, and figuring it was a chore, and maybe I could find ways to fast forward through it, even though then I would miss whatever he was saying. And I was shocked at what a great production I thought it was. I was thinking they were going to need to use video like the January 6th committee to dress it up. But Joe Biden was all personality and all ready to go against the haters. And it was really a great performance.
So you want him to run next year?
I'm not making that choice yet. I don't know what the alternatives are or what the Republicans
or what the actuarial outlook is.
Who knows? Who knows?
But it was a great speech, and that's what we need. We need fight back.
We do, absolutely, but intelligent fight back, and that I think is exactly what he showed.
And that's what we urge you all to do around the country against these 272, whatever they are, anti-LGBTQ bills. You've got to fight them. And even if you have no chance of winning, have a protest and show that this is not acceptable. And you'll find out that you have allies and you have people who will stand with you. And that'll make you feel better.
And these fights sometimes take a while, so you got to start somewhere. Next week and the following week, the lovely Maren Johns will be sitting in for me. Thank you,
We'll miss
Maren.
you, Ann.
I'd say I'd miss you, but that would probably not be true. I'll be back.
Bye-bye.